Hello, I'm Zapchon, and the only thing that you really need to know about me for this to make sense is that I'm an ex-staff member on the Green Pepper Discord and the Somewhere in Nevada Discord. I mean, it's basically the same thing at this point, but, you know. And I'm here to do this interview thing because I'm being asked about it, so here we are. This isn't very professional, but I don't do well when I talk professionally, so that's how this is going to be. So in his Twitter response, Kelzad says, we had different ideas regarding a community project, and that community project is the cancelled MPN server that I'm sure you've heard a lot about already. And, he says that Crinkles was too vague and dismissive of his ideas, and that just isn't even the case. I was there as all of it was happening, as were, a bunch of other people. And Kelzad didn't just present the ideas, and just debate a bit when they got, I don't know what to call it, when they got turned down. And he straight up argued with Crinkles for fucking, I don't know how long it was, but it was multiple times, and I want to say at least 10 minutes each. During this time, Kelzad was just completely obsessed with this shit as well. If you had anything to say that wasn't agreeing with him, or just something he wanted to hear in general, he would just go off at you like that. It was crazy, I distinctly remember saying one thing in the MPN server during one of his classic, scuffles with Crinkles, where he was arguing over taking over CRM or some shit like that, I don't even remember. And I said, I'm just here to animate the grey dick-shaped people shooting each other, or something along those lines, and then not even a minute passes and it's just ding, he's in my DMs telling me that that was a terrible thing to say, and why would I say that? Oh, you're such a fucking idiot for saying that, and while this story overall just isn't too important to what I'm saying, I'm just saying it because, I feel it's a perfect representation of what it was like being in those admin VCs at the time. Because I joined it afterwards and it was just a vocal version of that. The cancelled NPN server definitely wasn't the only time Kelzad got himself into a scuffle though. I mean, the MPN server was definitely one of his biggest ones since that's with the actual MPN team, but there was a whole lot of other less important, I guess, times that he got himself into fights or whatever in the community and stuff like that. I vividly remember one time in an admin VC, he was bragging to me in Clatform about how he had always been fighting, pushing for justice in the community. But I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, that's just completely absurd. If you're bragging about how long you've been fighting and causing conflict in a community, even if it's for quote-unquote justice, that just kind of says you're a problematic person. Because it's not good that you've been fighting. I'm sure he just didn't even realize it himself as well, but it is just really, really bad to have that sort of mentality going into any community. I had that sort of mentality for the longest time as well, and it wasn't good. Anybody who knew me in 2019 knows that I was just fucking hyper obsessed with oh, it's gotta fight for this, oh, it's justice, but it's just not worth it. It really, really is not worth it. You want justice, just do that by being a good person, setting a good example. That's the only way that you can really fight without being problematic in a community, but Kelzad didn't seem to agree with that sort of mentality, and he just keeps going with the whole, oh, I'm right, they're wrong, everybody is insane but me, that sort of thing. Going back to Kelzad's response to the leaked MP4 on Twitter, though, he also says that it doesn't represent him on a daily basis and stuff like that, and that's just complete bullshit. I mean, I don't know what he's like now, because I've not talked to him in months, but I know up until the point I was kicked from the staff team there, he was just relentlessly fucking shitting on everything Crinkles stood for, behind his back. Basically all the stuff he was saying is just the stuff he says in the recording, but on repeat. It was genuinely like listening to a broken record a lot of the time when I joined those admin VCs. it was always just, his sprites suck, mine are so much better, or, the game is terrible, it all blurs together, really, because it was just so many times that I had to listen to that sort of stuff, and even if the game doesn't do well, and if, like, you don't like it, that's fine, but just don't badmouth the guy you're working with behind his back, you know? Like, especially when you're working on projects with him. Like, that's just the part that always bothered me the most. The fact that, like, Crinkles trusts this guy enough to actually work with him on stuff, which is a very enviable position to a lot of people in the community. Kelzad just completely abuses that trust and, like, just doesn't even fucking like the guy that he's working on it with, and it's really nothing short of sickening to me. Like, if you have an issue with somebody, just fucking tell them, you know, don't just gossip about it behind their backs and then expect them to just know. That, to me, at least, is just common sense. Another claim they make is that they left the MPN team because of Sean, and I'm not going to talk about the actual Sean situation since I'd rather not touch that with a 10-foot pole. But I will say that Sean is definitely not the reason they left the team, especially since Kelzad never even left the team at all. Kelzad was actually kicked off of the team after he overstepped his ground a bunch of times and was generally an uncooperative and argumentative person to work with. What's probably the biggest lie in his Twitter response though is the claim that he has no malcontent for anybody else in the community, which I'm not going to speak about anybody else's situations because I don't know if they want those publicized or not, but I'll go a bit into my situation with Kelzad personally. It's a pretty long story, so I'll do my best to tell the shortest version of it I can without leaving out any important details. I was on that staff team for about 3 years, the GP team I mean, and I want to say I was pretty loyal throughout all of it. Sometimes a bit too loyal, I kind of made myself look like an ass a bunch of times just trying to defend them. But yeah, outside of one situation that I spent 2 whole years trying to make up for, I'd say that I was pretty fucking loyal to them. But Kelzad's desire, I guess, to replace CRM in the community because he didn't see it as a proper representation started to become less of a desire and more of an obsession. That obsession with destroying another Discord server and fixing the community in his perspective is what led to him arguing with Crinkles all the time and arguing with his friends too. Because he didn't care who it was. If somebody was disagreeing with his stance on what the community should be, he was going to argue with them about it, and not in the good, like, debate sort of way. I mean in the fuck you, I'm right, you're wrong sort of way. So obviously because I kept continuously disagreeing with the things he was saying, he was looking for an excuse to get me out of the team for quite a while after that. Basically just waiting for me to fuck up so that he could kick me and make it look justified morally. And after a good few months he got that excuse when I ended up having an argument with another moderator on the team who goes by the name VRBSN, or Alex. We both did and said some regrettable things during that argument, but the important thing to remember is that we had resolved it after about a day or two. And sure, it was a bad argument, but it was the first one that I had had in the 3-year run that I had been on the team at that point. And even then, even though the argument was bad, it's not like I said that I was hoping he would die or anything. Like, it was bad, but not abysmal. But despite this, Kelzad essentially used this as his reasoning for kicking me from both the Somewhere in Nevada and GP Discord teams entirely, and essentially trying to excommunicate me from the friend group, which I heard through other members on that team that he was trying to do. On top of that, the vote to get me off the team was actually false. It wasn't a full staff team vote whatsoever, and when I confronted Kelzad about that, he just said that it was only the admins who were voting on it. But even if that was the case, it wouldn't explain why Red Guy never voted on it either. But despite all of that, the real atrocities in my situation with them happened after I was booted rather than before. Right off the bat, Kelzad was comparing me to a known pedophile in his message he was sending me when I was leaving, and claiming that I was never loyal and stuff like that. Even bringing up the situation from 2 years ago where I'd shared some gossip from the admin chat. Because I guess the measly 2 years that I spent trying to make up for it didn't mean much to him or something. And then immediately after that, Sod was sending me threatening messages and DMs showing that he had recorded an entire conversation that I'd had with him about the situation between me and Alex. And despite the fact that the argument had long since ended with Alex and me and him were on good terms again, So I'd felt it necessary to go door to door with all of my friends, trying to make them hate me or something like that. And dealing with that was probably one of the most stressful experiences that I've ever had online, because anybody who knows me knows that I value my friends quite a lot, and so anybody who knew me at the time knows that they probably got a DM from me asking if we were still cool, because I was genuinely panicked over this, because Sod was warping the situation, saying that, oh, Zapchon doesn't care if Alex has COVID and stuff like that. Just ridiculous claims, things that I'd never even said in the situation whatsoever. Like, I said some bad things in the argument, but I never said something as bad as that. There was also a call that I had with Kelzad a bit after that when, well, around the time that the Kelzad MP4 got leaked, the one of him in the admin chat screaming about crinkles. And he, for some reason, thought that I could just make that recording disappear. Like, I don't know why Kelzad thought that, but, well, the conversations I had with him in that call afterwards were just very, very intense, to say the least. I mean, he started shouting, and I started shouting, and there was a load of snarky comments towards each other. Just, it was terrible. But that call also contains a lot of sensitive personal information about both me and Kelzad, so I won't be discussing it, as I want to respect both of our privacies there. I guess what I'm getting at is that a lot of what happened could have easily been avoided, but instead GP decided to prolong it and just keep it going out of seemingly nothing but pure spite. Because I don't recall doing anything to them before that point that would cause them to act on something like that. The only thing I had done at the absolute most was mention it to a few friends, since I wanted to make sure again that they were still cool with me. In a similar topic, the whole situation seriously fucking blows for another reason. That being that my friendship with the rest of the team was either stunted or lost entirely. I remember in the case of Gib50 and Cymberine, it really stung when that happened, since I respect both of them for multiple reasons. There's not really much more to say about it than that, but one thing I definitely should mention is that besides Kelzad and Sod, I don't think that anybody on that team really sets out with malicious intent in mind. They're good people who are just caught up in a bad situation as far as I'm concerned. I do certainly wish that they wouldn't do some of the things they do, and I also wish that they would think for themselves a bit more rather than just echoing what Kelzad says most of the time, but it would definitely be exaggerating to say that I hate them or anything. Honestly, the most I want regarding that is just for Billy to talk to me genuinely and express any real issues he has with me himself, and for Cymberine to just try talking to me like I'm an actual human for once, since that's been near impossible so far. Because I honestly miss both of them as friends, I really do. And while this is probably going to sound absolutely pretentious, I don't think hope is really lost for Kelzad either, as bizarre as that might sound. I think all he has to do is just own up to his problems. But actually, I don't mean denying them or giving any of that vague I may have done something wrong in the past type bullshit. I mean, man the fuck up and actually own up to your problems for once. You know, just have a bit more humility, and I could make a whole list of people who would forgive you just for that. I mean, while I personally wouldn't ever want to talk to Kelzad again, even if he did that, it'd be hard for me to hold any contempt for him. At least if he's actually telling the truth when he does it. At the end of the day, all I want is for the community to just go back to not caring about who's right and who's wrong, and just making cool animations, right? Because that's what it's supposed to be about. It's not meant to be any of this like playground turf war on the fucking internet over servers and whatever. I just want to animate. I mean, like I said in the MPN server, I'm just here to animate the grey dick-shaped people shooting each other. And I think I speak for everybody when I say that talking about drama is tiring, so I'm just gonna end my interview here.
Hi, my name is VRBSN, VRBSN, or Alex. Me being Kelzad first started off as me joining CRM, being a CRM mod. I applied there, and they took me in. And I think one of the most attractive things they saw in me was I was someone who was willing to kind of bridge the gap between CRM and GP. There had been a lot of things happening, and I guess I was zealous enough to try to think that I could fix the problem. It took us a while to kind of get in contact with him, but when we did, things started off just kind of getting to know each other, pretty amicable. And then after that, I kind of tried to discuss the issue with him. He pushed back. He was actually just stonewalled. he was saying at the same time, at one point he was saying, oh, he won't talk to me, and then at the another point he's saying, oh, I can't talk to him, and it just felt really weird, like he's almost avoiding the entire situation entirely. The things that I heard that they were using against him at the time, out of context, seemed a little like a little understandable, but later I actually learned that these things came from a very different place than I thought they did, and it sort of soured my opinions of him, that he was sort of willing to frame the things that happened in a certain light to make him look bad. After that incident, Ryan Kobler removed Red, which it was around that time. It was like me, Red, and Cinnamon, and like Z were all just like good friends. So when Kobler removed Red, I kind of got upset because it was very clear to me that Kobler was just doing it to fucking because he didn't like Red. After that, I just ended up kind of following Red over to GP, and then slowly starting to get to know Kelzad a little more. At that point, he was a pretty funny guy, pretty easygoing, but he would still have these moments of just what seemed like over-aggression. It seemed like he just didn't really understand that he was being a dick, and if you kind of called him out on it, he would make you the target, and it always felt kind of odd trying to call him out. As I got the crowd, he was pretty okay, as long as you set your boundaries. Not the best, but not the worst. After a while of us kind of hanging out, CRM explodes, and at that time we had been discussing trying to make a new Madness server for like a CRM, a better CRM, quote unquote. So when CRM exploded, Sin was created probably the same day, and I was brought in as a mod. As the server started to fill up and things started to kind of like even out, Dom gets created and everything. That kind of stuff starts to even out. Me and I can notice Kelzad get a lot more, I guess, open with his judgment against the community and the people who aren't animate, specifically people who don't animate. If you don't animate, you're like worse than dirt to him. I've noticed that, or you're just not funny. If you're not funny or you don't animate, you're worse than dirt to him. As the entire mod chat, every single time we ever had a mod chat, it was, look at all these Redditors. Reddit bad. It's Dom bad. Ugh, everyone sucks. I animate. I'm cool. He's very petty. After that, we get informed of the new MPN server. Kelzad does his best to sort of, as we get told of the server, we kind of get sold. It gets sold to us as like a official Madness comments, like Crinkle's backed, and he sort of sold it to us like that. I later ended up finding out that Kelzad sort of twisted the words there again to make it sound like that's what was going to happen, when in reality it was literally just a Project Nexus server. It was a server for Project Nexus. It wasn't a server for CRM or like a CRM2. It was literally just he bent the words to try to make it seem like it was something that it wasn't. So, and after a while, Kelzad starts butting heads with the MPN team to get them to turn it into, like, it seemed like his idea was to get them to make the server and then slowly start to move the server in the direction that he wanted, when Uncle and all the other really amazing MPN people were just like, this is an MPN server, don't make it anything else. After a couple months of waiting, there's an incident where I guess apparently Sean ended up learning about the server, and they ended up blaming one of the other mods, Cinnamon, for it. And I guess it was a big enough deal that Sean knew about the server that they removed Cinnamon just without any overhead. The hierarchy sort of went, it was Uncle Funkle and Bob Dude sort of like okaying everything, and then it was me and Kelzad and everyone else just sort of like, the issue I notice is whenever Kelzad isn't in the highest hierarchy, like the highest power, he starts making very brash moves, like here where he removes Cinnamon without kind of the okay or the go ahead from Funkle, and this caused a rift in communication. MPN decided to remove Kelzad from the project because it sort of made that was the sort of final straw that broke the camel's back, where he crossed a line where he just sort of overstepped his bounds and generally just kind of kept being unpleasant to work with. I want to point out that later on, it ended up even stating like that him knowing is not a big deal. He's a part of the team. It's not the biggest they actually said they wanted people to know about the server beforehand, so it wasn't ever a secret. It was just, I guess, I'm still not sure exactly why she was removed, but that was that. As he's getting removed, the recording that I did, 2517, the recording of Kelzad having a meltdown out of frustration because he wasn't able to sort of co-opt the server into his image, and then he just melted down. So, as someone who isn't really a fan of that type of thing, especially because he kind of asked for it, I sort of kept it as a, I had felt like I had a duty to record it just to kind of remember how he is. Through one mean or another, he ended up actually finding out that I had the recording, and he allowed me to keep it as a sort of token of loyalty. I guess that's sort of how he explained it. After this incident, he kind of got a lot more vindictive and a lot more angry at the MPN team, and at that time I was just kind of sitting on the record. He knew I had the recording, but I was just sitting on it. A couple months after that, I got coronavirus. I actually got COVID-19. And I had to be locked in my room for a good while. In the meantime, I kind of hung out with this increasingly unstable Kelzad and sort of the rest of the people trying to corral him into trying to calm the fuck down, because it felt like he was just getting more and more angry at everyone and more quick to just try to like beam people for existing. Me and Zapchon actually ended up getting into a little scuffle over, I don't exactly remember what, but it was something very stupid, and we both said a lot of really dumb things, and we both kind of just freaked out at each other. It felt like just because we were venting, we just needed to, we had a lot of angst, and we just needed to push it somewhere, so we just ended up pushing it to each other. It was just a dumb argument, and we ended up making up and everything. But as we were making up, Kelzad uses the fact that I'm sick as a sort of like a hammer to destroy Zapchon's like waning reputation across the mod team, and he sees this as a reason for him to remove Zapchon. Kelzad sees that as a reason to remove Zapchon from the mod team from both Sin and GP. In the meantime, we had already kind of made up and become close friends again, and in fact, I was actually telling them, like, hey guys, you don't need to get rid of him. He's actually, like, whatever problems we had it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't any reason. But they kept, I guess, speaking for me, and they kept saying, oh, he's trying to bully you for having coronavirus. I don't like that. And, you know, along with a lot of, I guess, really things that he's done in the past, things that he can't really control anymore, they end up removing him from the team. I was actually even there when they voted to get rid of him, and I remember them telling Zapchon that all the mods had voted to get rid of him, when really it was only Kelzad, Amethy, and Give50 that voted. And I find that kind of interesting, where he twisted the truth a little bit to like make it sound a lot different. He does that quite a bit. I'm not a big fan of it. After that incident, there is the day right after that incident, a little something happened where I felt like he overstepped his bounds on a personal issue, and I tried to control the issue, and I tried to continue to kind of de-escalate, but I guess that was just, I stepped out of line, and I just became the person he tried to bean. And I got, frankly, really sick of it. I told him multiple times to stop and leave me alone, and I don't know what you want me to do about the situation, but after that, I just kind of left. I left the server, I left the mod team, I just kind of left everything for a couple months. I came back, and of course I'm upset at him, because I don't feel like... I'm starting to kind of put all the pieces together in my head, and like, this is all kind of bad, and I realized I actually still had the recording. And I kind of showed it to a couple of people, and it got passed around. It ended up becoming the Twitter clip it is now. Kelzad, he ended up reaching out to me on Twitter and tried to get how I feel about everything. I gave him all the reasons that I had for losing faith in him, and he backpedaled and essentially kept moving goalposts about saying, oh, sorry's not good enough, and then sorry, all we need is a sorry, and then sorry's not good enough, and all this nonsense about how I could have made him look stupid if I just would have told him how I felt, and all this garbage. After that, Amethy, Cymberine, ended up reaching out to me, and from what I remember, from what I saw, it sounded like she just... I'm a social person, so like when someone says, hey, you know, someone misses talking to you, I'm more prone to try to speak with them than not. My relationship with Amethy at the time wasn't really existent, so I was just like, oh, what does this person want? And she started off very cheery, and she started off very happy, and then after a while, I kind of realized that she was just lying to me to sort of get my take, a more personal take on the situation, and that sort of upset me, because it's like, again, you're just trying to lie and manipulate to get what you want, and it seems like you're both very good at doing that. After we're done with the initial conversation and sort of say farewell, I try to DM her again, and it's very obvious that she's just ignoring me, and it was all just essentially Kelzad sending out a pawn to get a more personal take of how I felt, to try to try to suss out any sort of inconsistencies and any things that I was kind of too scared to say to him. Yeah, and that felt kind of, again, Kelzad just manipulating to try to get what he wants, and it's not good at all. I'm kind of over it all, though. I guess what I would want for everyone is to just kind of like, I don't want Kelzad, I don't want the worst for the guy, of course. When I first met him, he was a pretty funny guy. It's just, he started slowly letting the community sort of take hold of him, and, you know, if he were to come out, I guess apologize, I wouldn't say no. You know, I'd love to be friends with the guy, because he's also friends with a lot of the people that I like build bridges rather than burn them. I don't know, I guess, and then the whole manipulation thing with Cymberine kind of soured my taste of that person, so maybe not her, but everyone else, like, especially Billy. I miss Billy. Billy's a cool guy. Shout out Billy. Yeah, I think that's kind of everything I have to say.
Hi there. I go by Cinnamon-Satyr. I've been a member of the Conference Room of Madness and Discord of Madness staff since June 2020, as well as the Madness Project Nexus server. I'm here because I was asked to shed some light on what happened with the original MPN server, and more specifically, what happened with Kelzad. This is a retardedly long story, and one that I will try my best to condense into a sensible window. Just know that 6 months isn't a very short time, and I may go on for a bit. Bear with me. This clusterfuck starts way back last year when I was first recruited as a mod in the now-defunct CRM. The June 2020 mod team consisted of myself, VRBSN, Red Guy, and another moderator who did not wish to be involved, so I have kept his name censored. Within the first month of my deputization, Red approached me. We were friendly at the time, so I didn't find it odd. Especially not when he struck up a conversation about CRM. What did catch my attention, though, was that it was about its owner, Sparrow. He asked what I thought of him. My experience was very limited with the community as a whole, so I didn't have much input. He took the opportunity to invite me to a call with Kelzad on his behalf to talk about some less savory sides of the bird. I accepted. When I proposed asking Sparrow for his view on what Kelzad had to say, Red discouraged it. While I did find this odd at the time, I figured that I would at least hear Kelzad out before taking any further action. And so the call was arranged in the GP admin chat. Kelzad's main arguments cited intrusive thoughts Sparrow experienced years prior and had sought treatment for, as well as an incident where, in a state of fight or flight, he attacked someone. It wasn't until the tail end of the call that Kelzad presented something relevant to the community. A semi-infamous call involving a past moderator's demotion. However, this is a very serious topic for what it is, and this is not the time to go into it. I do not wish to rush any sort of explanation of it, if there is to be any. This was the one thing I did not demand evidence of due to its nature. I was in Kelzad's court. I agree that Sparrow was not the optimal person to represent the main Madness server, even if I did not disagree with all of his evidence. I continued to moderate in CRM alongside Red Guy and VRBSN, both of whom had also been summoned to Kelzad. The last mod of our generation immediately confronted Kelzad over what he described as manipulative language and goals. At the time, I tried to convince him it could have been a slip of the tongue on Kel's part. Hindsight really is perfect, though. For the next few months, not much changed. Red was discharged with bias for leaking CRM mod information, and BSN resigned alongside him in protest. Despite never getting much closer to Kelzad, I was invited to be a part of what would become the original Madness Project Nexus server. At the time, I was the only remaining representative from CRM. Every other mod was from the Green Pepper team. And this is where things began to slowly go downhill. As a side note, Kelzad actually initiated the server's creation. After receiving the go-ahead from Crinkles and Swain, he rounded up his mods as well as the others of Team Madness together. Why this is interesting is that Kelzad appears to have been lying to the people under him. About what, you may ask? Well, there's a lot he could have been lying about, but this time it was the reason the server existed. Publicly, he operated under the impression that the Madness Project Nexus server was intended to be CRM2, a new official Madness server, and one he very much wanted to be in charge of. This wasn't particularly obvious to anyone outside of Team Madness just yet, who had very much shot him down as soon as they heard it. I have also heard confirmation of this from VRBSN while talking about the situation. This catches up later, I promise. In the meantime, things weren't lining up with what Kelzad had warned me against. Inevitably, I did end up interacting with Sparrow quite a lot since I did mod his server. The problem was that I was noticing a significant lack of behavior I was told to expect from him. When someone questioned him, which wasn't uncommon, he didn't whip out the idea of demotion or removal from the server. He was actually quite willing to accept that he was wrong. When he was pressed on why the old mod chat was archived and inaccessible, with some not-so-subtle allegations of hiding evidence from yours truly, he ended up opening it to every mod. I was already iffy on some of the reasoning Kelzad provided me months ago, so my loyalty to both parties was shaky. This dissonance did not stabilize that. I wanted to try settling things in the most direct way possible, asking about it. I didn't trust either of them though, so I ended up taking a detour. I sent both Sparrow and Kelzad identical messages, pleading with them for honesty and integrity, and to tell me what was going on. Kelzad responded to me first. A call was sorted out on August 17th. Despite asking for it to be alone, Kelzad did end up bringing Red and Sod in. I was greeted with hostility. Evidently, Kelzad couldn't trust me because Sparrow was still in control of my opinions, and that I was too smart for my own good. God forbid I formed thoughts that contradicted his narrative. I tried to remain neutral in the call, though it would be wrong to say I was with Kelzad at this point. Every time I asked for evidence of Sparrow doing something wrong, relevant to the community, it felt like it was dodged. At one point, I insisted against listening to his recording of Cymbrine's demotion because I had a copy with far more context. 40 minutes provided to me by Sparrow, as opposed to the measly 7 Kelzad offered. At this, he accused me of not wanting evidence. Not wanting his meant he wasn't willing to work with me. Not wanting his evidence meant I didn't want the truth. The rest of the call went about as smoothly. In the end, he reminded me that he did not trust me because if I wasn't with him, I was against him. This was, of course, untrue, but irrelevant to him. What made me drop my final pretense of neutrality, though, was the multiple threats he made to remove me from the MPNS. He was dangling a position over my head like a turkey leg, something he had explicitly warned me about Sparrow doing. Especially if I stepped out of line and questioned him. Fortunately, I happened to have a contact with a member of Team Madness. As unfortunate as it may sound, the team member was Sean. Regardless of what he had done prior, he was the only line I really had at this point, so I worked with him. And before I continue, I do want to make it abundantly clear that I do not defend Sean on the drama he's kicked up in the past. That's not a topic for this video, but I know plenty of people would take me not clarifying this as a statement of my support for him. Sparrow's interview came a few days later. He was aware of the points leveled against him by Kelzad because I had asked him about them. He took me by the hand and walked me through the old mod chat, pointing out hypocrisies and aggression present from Kelzad and Cymbrine when they modded for CRM. One previous mod was able to collect 19 pages of messages denoting Cymbrine's shitty behavior to her alone. He detailed the what, the why, and the when over the course of 3.5 hours. Sparrow, someone who was supposed to be a manipulative, conniving, spiteful rat, was the most honest and open anyone had been in the entire situation. Something was not right. I passed my findings along to Uncle Funkle at Sean's behest. I made it clear my intention was not to have Kelzad removed to any degree. I just needed to be heard. Thankfully, it was well received. What I said to him is largely similar to what I've said here, so I've spared you from having to sit through all of this twice. I believe it's safe to return to the debacles on the actual server now. It picks back up, I swear. Kelzad had dropped many hints to the server at large that he was expecting a higher position amongst the moderators. He wanted to be the head administrator, on par with the actual members of Team Madness. When this was shut down, he did not take it lightly. At the same time, Team Madness was well aware of the play he was attempting to make. It would be difficult not to be, all things considered. Kelzad left the server after this, which brought further, though not completely just, scrutiny on him. It just happened to be bad timing, but something that ended up leaving a sour taste in people's mouths. When he came back, not much changed apart from him becoming more obviously aggressive. Things carried on similarly, with growing tension between myself and basically everyone but BSN. There was nothing particularly special and nothing new. The same attitude from Kelzad, the same private GP calls where he insulted myself and members of Team Madness, and backdoor politicking. And then CRM went down. I was freaking the fuck out, as you might be able to imagine. As I was assembling a small server for the CRM mod team to discuss what happened, as well as tell them about everything I had been up to behind closed doors, I asked the MPNS if they had any knowledge of what happened. Given that Sparrow's account had been compromised and had deleted CRM from the inside out, nobody knew anything just yet. The only threads that existed were older chat claiming responsibility for a mass false flagging campaign against CRM because Kobler was streaming RoboCop. While I was busy with all that, Kelzad and Simbrine started to hint at how tragic it was that there was no longer a main Madness server. Oh, and we happen to have one ready to go? My, how convenient! I was angry enough to start poking back publicly now. This continued for a bit until Sean, cheeky shit he was, decided to message Simbrine. Despite him being a member of Team Madness and very much knowing about what was happening inside the server long before I spoke up, the blame was instantly pinned on me. Partially because, well, nobody else was in there who didn't suck Kelzad's dick for a living. And if Kelzad doesn't like you, they won't like you either. At this point, I was removed from the project. However, this was an action that was not weighed in on by anyone at Team Madness, specifically Bob Dude or Uncle Funkle, which served as the deal breaker. Kelzad was thereafter removed from the project as he pantomimed feelings of betrayal and reluctance, and Simbrine stormed out with him. The server was placed in Sot's hands then, and it wasn't around long enough for me to get screenshots before he deleted it. A real pity. However, since Kelzad had a copy of the template, the rules, and the bots, Somewhere in Nevada was created and advertised before CRM's hypothetical corpse was even cold. However, since Kelzad had a copy of the template, the rules, and the bots, Somewhere in Nevada was created and advertised before CRM's hypothetical corpse was even cold. There is more apart from this whole situation, but I've tried to trim it as much as possible. I've assembled many iterations of a document I intended to release to the public detailing all of it, but none of them ever saw the light of day. I was too dissatisfied with how my tone was more akin to a smear piece, and I do genuinely respect Kelzad's work. Basically, I pussied out. This is the last and only shot at this that will ever be shown to anyone. In the end, all of this was about someone with an ego so bloated that he cannot accept that anything he does is possibly wrong. Kelzad pins his flaws, such as being manipulative, onto other people, and tries to appear as some sort of savior from the people he projects onto. If he believes someone is unworthy of a position, even if it's just keeping the seat warm in a Madness Discord server, he will hate them. He will go as far as running a smear campaign against some Brit who called him out on being a dickhead and willingly obscure evidence that could paint him as anything but the victim. He will willingly remove parts of evidence that provide context that could give a situation nuance when he seeks out people to forcefully remove him. When you question him, you are threatened. That's because if you are not with him all the way, you are against him. As a final addendum, I hear he can be a great person, and I do believe the people and close friends of his who have said that. When BSN used to tell me about how he really was kinda just a funny Danish man with a bit of pride, it hurt a little bit, because he obviously hadn't seen the sides I had. In the same way, I never saw what he did. I do not have a full picture of the person, merely the fullest image of the Madness Project Nexus server I can have. With all of this said, I want to affirm that none of this is meant to discredit positive experiences others have had with Kelzad, nor his work. This is only about my interactions with him and how they have ended in nothing but disaster. In conclusion, yeehaw, babe.
Hey, so I'm Spirit. I was the founder of CRM and a former mod here and there during its lifetime. I'd like to take this time to share my experiences as well as the experiences of mods I used to work with in regards to Kelzad. So let's start at the very beginning. I first came into direct contact with Kelzad and GP around the time CRM was first made. We had a positive relationship with him and his members. There were practically no problems between us at the time. I used to even spend time with people like Sethic and Gib, and I remember how I played some PB2 custom games with Kelzad. So overall, it was a nice experience for a while. But something changed a little while later, and that was around the time when the first big mod rift in CRM happened, around 2016, largely due to my failures as server owner. I left my mods hanging during important moments because I didn't want to deal with the stress of moderating again. From that point forward, GP did nothing to stop a toxic anti-CRM environment on their grounds, where their channels on their server posted, quote-unquote memes about how CRM was a bad place to be in. And that's the thing, you'll notice a trend where every time Kelzad has a problem with an individual or group, he and his group typically meme the people they have a problem with. Prime example of this was with the drama between GP and Matchek, where GP was openly sharing memes mocking Janner and his group. And while the drama between both groups has been resolved since then, it was still probably one of the biggest incidents leading to community divisiveness, and a big example on how Kelzad's priorities weren't on the community as a whole, as he likes to say. The situation was getting so bad to the point that we had to set up a conference with their mods and ours, where we tried to have both parties agree to cut the shit talking for the sake of avoiding divisiveness in the community. Kelzad at first played the victim card at the start of the meeting, where he thought that we organized it just to berate him, which wasn't the case. And honestly, that reflected a lack of understanding he had about the influence he has over the situation. And again, it went to show how he didn't seem to understand how his memes were contributing to a toxic atmosphere in the community. And he seemed more focused on his own image relative to everyone else. Well, at the end of that conference, at most, we got him to agree not to shit talk us in public specifically. I guess he figured he couldn't control himself to not shit talk us in general. Although my mods and I agree amongst ourselves to do our best to cooperate with Kelzad, despite his memeing behavior. We thought things would settle as we tried letting bygones be bygones, but we were wrong. For the next few years, one of the biggest hurdles CRM had to face were malicious rumors being spread about the mods and how they operated. By malicious rumors, I don't obviously mean constructive criticism, because to be fair, there were incidents where the mods, myself included, didn't do our jobs properly. And to be fair, we should be called out on that. I'm talking about more on the lines of, this person/group is trash, and you shouldn't listen to them at all type of thing. And by having our mod team undermined, it not only made recruitments harder, but it also made some server members less lenient to talk issues through with the mods. It also applied additional pressure to the mods. For some of the mods, that type of harassment ate away at their capability to think straight, leading to a vicious cycle where the mods got agitated by the gossip, and then acted out of agitation, which led to even more gossip to deal with. The reason I mention this is because Kelzad himself did nothing on his behalf to stop people from spreading this groupthink mindset of harassing each other. And obviously, I don't just mean this with CRM. To be clear, I'm not saying Kelzad has a responsibility to change anyone's mind about anything. I'm sure he has a lot on his plate considering he's also an animator. What I am saying, though, is that if Kelzad wants to declare himself as someone who cares about the community or wants to help, quote-unquote, fix it, then he does have the responsibility of telling people that this kind of shit-talking is bad for everyone, instead of excusing it as, oh, it's just memeing around, or, oh, this is just someone else's opinion, can't do anything about it. Again, over the course of years, I haven't seen any evidence where Kelzad himself went out of his way to help reconcile issues between people. If anything, the evidence of him helping to spread malicious rumors about people he disliked has only grown over time. Only now have people really started shedding light on it. When I left CRM for the first time in around 2017, it was because I failed my core responsibilities as the server owner, and I had betrayed the trust of close friends. It was a very difficult time for me personally, as I was dealing with serious real-life issues. Kelzad himself knows about that because when I left, I had a mental breakdown with him on a voice call where I told him how the whole thing was stressing me out. The turning point was around 6 months later in October of that year. Kelzad decides to send me messages where he humble brags about how CRM isn't doing well and he's seeing growth on his end with GP. And this was absolutely bizarre to me because the context for that conversation was I complimented him for the recent Realm episode he put out at the time. What I assume happened was Kelzad had the wrong impression as to how I felt about CRM because he thought that I hated the server similar to how much he did. He started showing his true colors in DMs about how much he despised it. So I told him off. I told him exactly how I felt about the things he said. Kelzad never responded back, but that was a big motivator for me to return to CRM in 2019 and help fix things where I had failed originally. Even though it wasn't his intention for me to do that, in a way I'm grateful that he said the hurtful things he said. It helped push me to get the closure I needed. After all the big reworks that we did, I decided to leave again in January 2018. But before then, the CRM mods and I wanted to take this opportunity to create a bridge between ourselves and GP. We did this in two major ways, with myself for a third. Firstly, we promoted GP and its affiliates in our streaming channel, where we made @everyone announcements every time they went live streaming. Secondly, after a few months had passed, we allowed the GP higher-ups to become a part of the mod team in CRM. We did it as a gesture of goodwill, to show that we wanted to be as transparent as possible so maybe everyone could have worked together to make things better. And thirdly, for myself, I actually went to apologize to Kelzad about not talking to him after he sent me those messages. Kelzad basically replied back with, "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings," which, if that was honestly true, then it concerned me even more, because to this day I'm not sure as to what his intentions were with the messages he sent. Still, I insisted on apologizing because I wanted to make sure there was absolutely zero bad blood anywhere. We saw it as a hopeful, fresh start. And again, we were wrong. Once Kelzad and his members were made mods, a lot of friction happened, especially between Kelzad and Sparrow. To keep it simple, both sides had issues with the other in moderating, and it all boiled over to the point that the mod partnership dissolved within just a few months. And that was it for the most part. That was 2018. You might be asking, well, wait a minute, Spirit. That was 3 years ago. Isn't that information outdated? That's a very fair point. So the question is, has Kelzad positively changed since then? Based on what's been coming out about the things he said, not just about CRM, but also about other people he had disagreements with, the answer is no. And there's significant recent evidence to prove that. Firstly, when CRM was deleted last August, the CRM mods went out of their way to warn other servers about how our server got hijacked. The only thing Kelzad did on his front was that he took advantage of the situation. This was when he created the Sin server within just almost 6 hours after CRM went down. Then he and his affiliates immediately started spreading misinformation, telling everyone that the reason CRM was deleted was because of the RoboCop stream. He wanted to convince everyone that CRM was deleted by Discord TOS, therefore CRM couldn't return. The problem with this was that nobody in the CRM mod team knew what happened. Discord hadn't gotten back to us until weeks later, and that was only through Sparrow because he was the owner of the server. In other words, there's no way Kelzad could have known any of this. He intentionally lied for the sake of redirecting the community into his new server, one that he hoped would become the new CRM. This was also the reason why we had to inform the community as to what happened so soon after CRM disappeared. Kelzad had pushed us into a corner. These attacks continued even after Dom took CRM's place. One of the biggest examples was that Kelzad went as far as to try and sabotage Dom's potential connection with the RP server, the RP sector ran by Audanti. He sent Red Guy to intimidate them by saying that if they partnered up with Dom, Sin would immediately retract their deal, despite the fact that Dom didn't mind if Sin also had a partnership with the RP sector. That's kind of bizarre coming from the person who proclaims he values the community. Wouldn't unity be a good thing? In the end, it didn't matter because even before Dom sealed the deal with the RP sector, Sin retracted their deal anyways. Secondly, before CRM was deleted, screenshots came to light where he privately told people that if he had the chance to delete CRM, he would have done it at some point. And finally, maybe the most damning recent example was the infamous video that got leaked, where he shit-talked Crinkles because Crinkles didn't share his vision for the PN2 server. To me, that was probably the worst indicator that nothing had changed, which was made even more obvious when his response letter to the community was not him taking responsibility for what he said, but rather trying to blow it off and going as far as saying, We are quite annoyed that I even have to come out with this message at all, and I would rather have ignored it. Like, Jesus, dude, of course you had to say something about it. You straight up called the original creator of Madness a pussy, and then said two of his trusted friends are mouthpieces. You don't think that alone earns a public explanation? It was through the combination of everything over the years that made us realize, regardless of how we felt or what our intentions were, Kelzad insisted on us being his enemy. As a result, we had to treat him as our enemy too to defend ourselves, especially since we were doing our best rebuilding CRM into Dom while struggling against the slander spreading on his ground. There were a lot of times where I tried building bridges with him, talking to him in a way to hopefully show that he did matter to me. Each time, those bridges were burnt, because working together wasn't his bottom line, if it meant he would have to compromise with others he disagreed with. And that's pretty much where we are now. But I want to make some things clear, especially to Kelzad if he's listening to this. Nobody reasonable in this community is saying that you are a bad person. Frankly, the idea of labeling people as good or bad is toxic in of itself. People aren't black and white. And I myself will be a hypocrite if I acted like I never shit-talked or did anything horrible to anyone. I'm ashamed of the times I did, and I acknowledge that I had done so as a means to cover up for my insecurities. To those people that I may have hurt with my words and actions over the years, I am sorry, and I am trying to become a better person to make up for it. But you, Kelzad, are making yourself out to be the bad guy when you keep scheming and talking behind people's backs like this, with no empathy to how they feel. You keep excusing yourself from self-reflecting and asking why you say or do the things that you do. As a result, you stop yourself from growing. Maybe because it's hard for you to admit you don't have everything figured out and you fucked up, especially to the people you've had disagreements with. For almost 5 years, I've done my best to try and find a silver lining with you. But after everything that's happened, the only logical conclusion I can reach is that right now, you're a narcissist, obsessed with the Madness community's drama for whatever personal reasons. I hope you figure out what they are, because if you can't, then maybe you do need some professional help. And that's not me joking around saying that. So, to make this criticism constructive, I'm going to leave you, Kelzad, with a final piece of advice. In 10 years, maybe 15 if we're being generous, there's a good chance Madness Combat will lose whatever relevance it already has in internet culture. And even if that won't be the case, I would imagine you, me, and the rest of our generation will eventually have to move on. When that time comes, the biggest thing that will stick with us isn't going to be the content we put out. It'll be the way we treated the people around us, especially the people who cared about us the most at one point. Those experiences shape our character. Zapchon, Cinnamon, and BSN are only a few names of the many people you've rejected because they tried to be honest and thought you would respect their values. Many of them were badly hurt by what you've done, and the proof is in how they've spoken out against you. That's not disloyalty. That's called integrity. The ability to declare right from wrong, even if it risks losing the respect of the people you love. And those people you've labeled and ostracized, yeah, they're not perfect. But it was never about perfection in the first place. I honestly believe the most beautiful thing about being human is our capability to positively change, despite our circumstances. So we should be guiding each other with patience and compassion to fulfill that. But you've never realized that, Kelzad. As much as I wanted to make you the owner of CRM at one point, your lack of empathy to others you disagree with made me realize that was impossible to do in good faith. At this point, I just don't want to see you crash and burn. Like everyone else, I want to see you become a better person for the sake of the people who still believe and care a lot about you. Because I guarantee you, if you don't change, then your problems aren't going to end with just the people who spoke against you in this video. It hasn't for years, and you know that. If you want to hold the community to a higher standard, as you said, how about you start with the way you treated the people who actually cared about you, even if you disagreed with them? I'm sorry it had to reach this point, but with the way the people and the server that I cared about were harassed because of this shit that's been going on for years, there isn't an alternative. You keep putting on a mask with people, saying what they want to hear 1 second, but then dropping them the moment their values don't match yours, slandering them behind closed doors to change others' perception of them. You have no idea how much pain you've caused to the people I cared about for years, and they kept mostly silent because they valued the community more than this Discord nonsense. The same goes for those of you watching who also slandered and didn't take responsibility later on, thinking you're hot shit. You may even had the nerve to slander others in public channels. I've seen it myself. You know who you are, and you should be ashamed of yourselves too if you have any dignity as people. Be better than that. To the mods of CRM who struggled through all this, I'm especially sorry that it took me this long to speak out. For all these years, I was scared that me saying something could cause more division in the community. and I felt that I would just be a hypocrite for speaking out because I've had my own issues. I don't know if the decision I made all these years was better than the alternative, but right now I'm glad that I had this opportunity to say something, and I hope it makes up for my lack of involvement. And Sparrow, if you're out there, I'm especially sorry to you. You were one of the people who tried their hardest on the mod team, and despite your mistakes, you absolutely deserve better than the way many people tried tearing your reputation to shreds. Wherever you are, I hope you're doing well out there, and I'm so damn proud of you for sticking through until the very end. You were a much stronger leader than I was, and I wish more people realized that. Thank you and all the other mods for everything. Hopefully that's all I have to say about that. If you have any questions or concerns, I'm always open to talk on Discord. Thanks for listening.